start first with Namo Tassa, please. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. So you can hear me okay? Today I'd like to give a presentation on the missionary work that we did in Hawaii. Venerable Devananda is in the audience. He's in the back over here. Most of you know him. And I invited him to go to Hawaii with me, a special island called Kauai. Actually, I think we arrived a year ago today. And we stayed for almost 6 months. So actually we left on the 22nd. I think we arrived on the 23rd. And it was a long trip and going through many time zones. So as you can see, Kauai is a very beautiful place. And I'll begin the lecture by showing a picture of our fifth Dhamma talk that we did while we were in Kauai. And before we went there, we didn't know anyone. We only knew one person who was a longtime friend of mine, and he was our kapia. And all the people you see there are people that we've met along the way. And actually the one person I knew before we entered the island is not in the picture. He's working. He worked 16 hours a day all the time. So this was our fifth Dhamma talk. There was about 19 people that came that night. And with us included, it was like 21 people, a gathering of 21 people. And we think it was quite a success. And I'm quite happy with that. Yes. So actually I planted a bunch of people to clap because I wanted to say that this is not really propagation in terms of the work that we did on the island. And we did something in modern times which is non-traditional, but in the time of the Buddha, we did the propagation in the only way that was known and in the only way that was written about. I pulled this off of Google today, and so you can see that the definition, I guess I should look at the screen so you can hear the microphone. The definition of propagation is the act or action of propagating as an increase in the numbers of and spreading of something abroad into new regions, an enlargement or an extension of a solid body. So basically it's an expansion, getting new people in one's way. In terms of missionary work, you can see in the first definition is the person sent by a church into an area to carry out evangelism or other activities as educational or hospital work. In this case, it was educational work. And the second one is most important. A person strongly in favor of a program, set of principles who attempts to persuade or convert others. So normally when someone does propagation and they go to when they go to the West, in particular America, and my view is actually outdated, it's from the late 90s. Normally a big shot monk from Myanmar or Thailand or something will be invited by a group of people who are running a small monastery in America run by immigrants, and it caters towards a certain ethnic group, like Thai, Laos, Myanmar, and Sri Lanka. And I used to live near the New York area, and that's how things were. And a monastery could be just a house. It could just be a 3-bedroom house, and you stick 4 or 5 monks in there. And there could be a few hundred devotees of that ethnicity. So usually the propagation was only done within Buddhist immigrant circles, and they were preaching to Buddhist devotees. So according to the definition of missionary work, under my belief, this was not really missionary work. It was still useful though, but it was supporting Buddhism and maintaining Buddhism in America for the people who were living there. What is Kauai? So the island of Kauai is where we. Just let me go back one step. So what we did was we did things a little bit differently. We were not invited by anyone, and we went there on our own. It was my doing, and I'll explain later. But my idea was to go Pindapata in America and let that be the propagation mechanism. And my idea was that if someone sees the monk for the first time, if someone sees the monk for the first time, this is very powerful, and it can help someone to later on, even if they don't notice right away, when times are tough or when they start to think about spirituality, they can remember those monks that they saw. And then they can think, maybe that was something important. Maybe that's something I should follow. The world's going this way, and those monks were going that way. And so I had a little bit of a taste of that when I've gone into America before. I did Pindapata in America 2006, 2008. And I could feel it, but the problem was I only did it for a short amount of time. And I wanted to do it for an extended period of time. And I'll get into the more detail of what I did in the past. But I could feel that it was a powerful mechanism. And that's why I invited Venerable Devananda to go with me. So I wanted to go to Kauai. It's a very small island. There's about 50,000 people. Honolulu, to give you some perspective, it's the most populous and popular city. It has 1.2 million people. Actually, I think Honolulu actually has only like 1 million people, but the other 5 islands make up maybe 1.2 million people. So there's very few people in this state. And so we wanted to do Alms Propagation. And this is a picture of us going alms. It's one of the few pictures we actually have that's semi-real. We met one lady on the road, and she asked to take our picture, and we posed for her, and she says, no, I want to get a picture of you like you face the house, like you go, like what you're doing, what I see all the time. So we turned around and we faced the house, and we did loving kindness meditation, because that's what we do when we're going for alms. This is a quote from the Vinaya. It says, "Walk among Santor for the blessing of the many folk, for the happiness of the many folk, and out of compassion for the world, for the welfare, for the blessing, the happiness of devas and men. Let not 2 of you go by one way. Monks, teach the Dhamma, which is lovely at the beginning, lovely in the middle, and lovely in the ending." So when these words were spoken by the Buddha, there was no Buddhism. There were 61 arhants in the world, including the Buddha. So there was no Buddhism, and we were going into a land essentially that had no established Buddhism, especially Theravada. Nearly everyone we met was through propagation, and quite often we did this every day, just about every day. for about 5.5 months. And a good portion of the days, as we were walking home, I would say to Bande Devananda, I'd say, today was a good day. It was a really good day today. But it was still only 9:30 a.m. So we did a lot of good. We felt very fulfilled and very satisfied about what we were doing. There's a sutta called the Kasi Bharadwaja Sutta. And in this sutta, again, the Buddha was going to a house, and the owner of the house says, why don't you grow your own food? And so they sort of talked back to the Buddha, and the Buddha was wonderful. He gave the whole simile of cultivating mindfulness. We actually had one or two people actually tell us to grow our own food while we were going Pindapata, but we weren't so quick and clever to talk about cultivating mindfulness. We don't touch money. This is our normal practice. And we don't store food, and we eat only things that are given, only food that is given to us hand to hand. And this was actually what helped us propagate, because we became dependent on other people. And by having other people help us along the way, this was a way for them to interface with us, for them to learn about the monk's life, and for them to appreciate the monk's life. So this next quote is actually from the ITBMU Vinaya book. It says, "If there is not Vinaya to control the order of the bhikkhus, if they do not follow the Vinaya rules, they would be a bad community of bhikkhus, and such will not be conducive to the arising of faith and clarity in other people." And this is from the standard diploma Vinaya book. The main thing is the arising of faith and clarity in other people. And the question is handling money included in this quote? Now, I said we don't use the money, and even when I go Pindapata in a well-established Buddhist country like Myanmar, I recently went Pindapata in a very poor village not very far from here, last Saturday and Sunday, and the previous week on Saturday. And when they offer me money, I refuse it. I say, Paisan Makainbu, which means I don't want to handle money. And I can see their eyes just light up with excitement. And sometimes they'll say sorry. They're still happy, but they'll say sorry. Or they'll try to find some food with a lot of energy and excitement. And it's really a blessing to go Pindapata in Myanmar, and to have people who know about Pindapata. But where we went, people did not know what Pindapata was, and I'll have a slide to actually show that. But we have a story of Paul. So is money part of that that gives faith? We had this one person named Paul, and we were waiting in front of his house. What we would do with Pindapata is we didn't want to advertise that we were trying to collect food. So what we would do is we would just stand in front of each house, and we would wait for them to come out and ask us what we're doing in front of their house. And we would practice loving-kindness meditation at that time. We would wait maybe about 30 seconds. The Buddha says in the Vinaya, not too long and not too short, that we should wait in front of each house. So while we're waiting in front of one house on our Saturday and Sunday route, this big person comes out with all these tattoos on his body. And he says, "What are you doing in front of my property?" like that. And he wasn't really yelling, but he wasn't happy. And by then we actually had sort of a canned way of talking to people. And the first thing we did was we said, "We're Buddhist monks." And he says, "Oh." And then the second thing we would tell him, which really sets the stage, is, "And we don't touch money." And then he says, "I like that." And then I showed him my bowl, and I opened it up, which was empty, and I said, "And this is my bowl. These are our bowls." And these are our bowls, and we're trying to collect our daily meal. We don't eat after 12, we don't store food, and we depend on people to eat. And if we don't get any food, we don't eat. And he looked at us, and before he was, why are you standing in front of our property? And then later he says, I have something for you. And so he went inside, and I think he gave us some, I can't remember which time it was, he gave us a handful of almonds that day. Or he gave us some crackers, I can't remember which. He ended up being our friend, and he gave us food many times, and he would go to the store and get us food, and he was a really good person. So this person was very far away from Buddhism, but he learned something, so we propagated to him. And a lot of times, this was one really prime example, but we had many subtle examples where we could share our lives with people and let them know that there's people that live an ascetic life, and they appreciated it, especially on this island. Why Kauai? So Kauai is not a very well-known island, but, well, as you can see in the picture, it's very... Uh-oh. As you can see in the picture, it's very beautiful. And everywhere you walk, just so many places, it's just so beautiful because the mountains are in the center and the ocean's on the edge. So you can it's a very beautiful place, and it just brings a lot of joy to your heart. And I always felt that it was good for meditation. I was there in 1999 before I became a monk, and I had quit my job and decided to travel around the world and maybe become a monk. And Hawaii was, in my mind, as an ideal place for a forest monk to be because it's warm. And in America, a lot of the places where the monasteries are not warm. And so I ended up, by chance, in history class we heard about hitchhiking. I ended up hitchhiking in 1999, and I was offered a job as a school teacher at a prestigious private school. And so I was overqualified for the job, actually. But it's just sort of funny that they hired the first person they picked up off the street. And I ended up staying there for 5 months. And it was a really wonderful experience, and I still keep in touch with a lot of people I've met, and I developed very strong connections with people there. And you'll see one of those people later on. It's a very beautiful island, and people who can live there, who can afford to live there, who can afford to live anywhere in the world, a lot of them choose this place. So Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, he owns a lot of acreage in Kauai. We were staying on the property of the person who started eTrade.com, which is a billionaire who started one of the first internet stock trading companies. We ate at a restaurant that was owned by another billionaire who had cheaptickets.com or cheap flights, I can't remember which. And the person who did Red Bull also has a lot of acreage as well. There's a lot of spiritually minded people who live there, and a lot of them are Christians. So we met some people who are very decent people, very spiritually minded people, and these are the people who live there that aren't the billionaires, and they do whatever they can to stay on that island. It was my dream monk location before I became a monk, and definitely afterwards. And for 15 years it's been on my mind. And now it's a little bit on Venerable Devananda's mind because it was a really good experience. And I contacted a friend about a thing called house sitting, where you stay in an empty house that's for sale or something, and they need someone to live in it to keep it clean. And he knows a lot about that, and I asked him if that's possible, and he said, let me know where and when you want to come, and I will help. And that's where the first seed was planted to go. Then Venerable Devananda came to Pa'aktoya in Malamian, and I told him about Kauai, and I told him about the demographics. There's nearly 40% Asian. What I didn't know was actually that most of these Asians had converted to Christianity, especially the Japanese. They were forced to after World War II. I told them about my previous experience in America with my own Pindapata and the supermarket, and I had written about this quite extensively, so he knew about that beforehand. And so when I went Pindapata in America, I stayed in a place. I was visiting my parents, but it was 60 miles away from my parents at my grandmother's beach house. And we had arranged something so that if I did not get any food, I could go to the supermarket, and there was an arrangement so that I could ask someone, an invitation so that I could ask the manager to have someone help me get the food, because we can't touch the food until it's offered. And then they would ring it up, and we'd open up our bowls, and then they would put the food in the bowls. This was in 2006, 2008. And we would go Pindapata, and we wouldn't get any food, and so we had this arrangement, and we used it every day, just about, unless someone came to bring us food. It was not really successful for two reasons. One was we didn't have enough time to really build people's trust or have people ask what we were doing. The other problem was that we had a backup plan. And so you're always taken care of. The world always takes care of you. But because we had a backup plan, we were taken care of. And so the world was not taking care of us because my father was at the supermarket. So with his arrangement there. But most of the time we lived alone without a kapia. The only kapia we had was the supermarket. So I had some experience of living alone without a kapia. Of course, I usually have a monk with me. It's very important. So the pitch means to sort of sell an idea. Was to live in Kauai for 6 months and not have a backup plan. And in the advertisement for this talk tonight, I said, let's go hungry for 3 days before we ask for an arrangement for food. And then I said, will you come with me for 6 months? Not only that, we'll be stuck on an island for 6 months. So Venerable Devananda said okay, because he thought it was a worthwhile experience with his time. His time is very valuable, and he thought this would be very worthwhile in terms of propagation and doing a Dhamma experiment. The idea originally was to live in a park. In the Buddhist times, we see that the Buddhist monks did this during the suttas, and they lived in the king's park. And one of the things that was nice was we can read about this. They say, let's go see the ascetics who follow Gautama Buddha, and they're referring to the park. They always knew where they lived, or where the Buddha himself lived. And there were naked ascetics, matted hair ascetics, and they had different discussions and disputes. And then they would get clarified, and usually the suttas end with a happy ending. And so in these parks, there were people who were spiritually minded and very poor people, and sometimes they were they might be doing drugs or something like that. They might be thieves, and so we'd have to actually be careful. It'd be very difficult conditions. But nevertheless, I had planned that this would be an accessible place where people could come and see the monks, and it would be known that the monks were there. But that never happened because the drugs in the park had grown very strong, and the thievery had gone very strong, and my kapia refused to let us really sort of stay there. And there was a booking problem as well. The park has limited campsites, and they were booked for the summer, and we could not stay there continuously. This was a picture of one of the beach parks that we could live on, and you can see it's right on the ocean. It's quite beautiful. We were better off without this park situation, though. The advantages of alms is that everyone would see the monk on the road, and that's definitely what happened. We would interact with Buddhists, so people who were Buddhists, they would come quite quickly and introduce themselves. And we would interact with non-Buddhists, like Paul, that I just mentioned. And of course, another advantage of going for alms is support within itself. So we could get food. And food was actually a major cost expenditure that I had figured in. Originally, we had planned on going to the supermarket and having some type of arrangement with my brother and the kapia in the supermarket. And I'm very happy to say that we actually never had a need to use an arrangement through a kapia at a supermarket. The idea was to shine the monk's life, where we would not use money. This is our normal. A lot of this is our normal activity, where we don't use money. We don't eat after 12. We could do meditation. We could do alms, use alms as our main source of food, and survive on fewness of wishes. And we didn't have a full-time kapia. My kapia had a job as a taxi driver. He worked 16 hours a day. Most of the time it's just waiting around for someone to call him. And so one story was the avocado story, where we were going Pindapata, and one lady came out, and she was a Jehovah's Witness, which is a sect of Christianity. And they actually go door to door. They're very famous for going door to door and preaching. And she asked us a bunch of questions, and again, in the beginning, she was not very happy to see us, but she was curious as to what we were doing. And eventually, I told her, we don't touch money. We're Buddhist monks. We don't touch money, and these are our bowls. And I would say the same thing over and over again. And she sort of turned a little bit, but not all the way. And she said, "Well, I have an avocado tree, and you're welcome to pick your own avocados." Now, according to Vinaya, we're not allowed to do that. So it has to be offered, plus we're not allowed to destroy living plants. So I wanted a kapia to go get some... that day we had a kapia giving us a ride, and I wanted that kapia who came to pick us up to pick some avocados for us, because that offer was ongoing. And Venerable Devananda said, "No. Let's let this ride. This is not right." And I said, "Come on, she offered. And again, Venerable Devananda said, "No, it's not right." So I trusted his wisdom. A couple weeks later, we would do 2 days per week, certain roads, and we had a schedule. I'll show that later. A few weeks later, I think it was about 2 weeks later, that same lady came out, and she had her hands together, and she said, "Savadi Kab, Savadi Kab," and she had 2 bags. She had 2 bags. I think there was avocado and some other things, and of course some Jehovah's Witness literature. And it was very nice. And she says, "I've been doing research, I looked at Wikipedia, and we're both sort of following the same path." And she was referring to the path of loving kindness. So we had talked quite a bit about what we were doing, and what we would do is practice loving kindness. And I always mention that, when they ask what we're doing, I would mention that we're practicing loving kindness and we're looking for food. A lot of times, the local people, they would think that our bowls were drums. So Indian drums, like tablas, they actually look quite a bit like that. And it's not just once or twice that people would say, "Hey, nice drums."